I am the elected solicitor, the district attorney for Charleston and Berkeley counties, the chief prosecutor. I brought my own timer here because I can get so wound up talking about the first topic that I won't make it to the second topic, and I want to get to both of them. The first is bond reform. As the Chief Circuit Defender talked to you about, the CJCC is working tirelessly together, all stakeholders, law enforcement, defense lawyers, prosecutors, every aspect of the criminal justice system to look at how we can make it better. And to borrow from Jason Sandoval, who is a DEA agent, we have recognized that we can't arrest our way out of these issues and problems, and we can't hug our way out either. But we've got to have good practical solutions to address the problems that we have. Bail bonds. If you have been around, you have seen me talking about the need to detain pretrial violent offenders. And that's not really risky for a prosecutor to say, right? That you want to keep somebody in jail until they're prosecuted because they're dangerous. The problem that we have is too many people are held in jail pre-trial because they're poor, not because they're dangerous. And the ask for you is to be patient and to have understanding with my office and with the bond-setting judges who are using new tools to analyze where somebody who is charged falls on the risk scale. They're looking deeper than ever than they've looked before to determine how risky it is to allow this person to be out. Because the reality is, if somebody is held in jail pre-trial on a bond that's $10,000, that bond wasn't set at $10,000 because the person was dangerous. You don't set $10,000 bonds on non-dangerous people. So if someone's being kept on that, they're there because they're poor and they can't afford it, and we're doing more harm than good by keeping them there. But what inevitably is going to happen, and what judges are so afraid of, and what some prosecutors are afraid of, is there's going to be a PR bond. There's going to be a person released, and they're going to hurt somebody, and it's going to be their fault. But what we have to realize is, although that may happen, we are doing far more harm than good by detaining people who aren't dangerous on the whole, and that nobody would ever expect to hurt someone. When we keep them in jail pre-trial and they lose their family, they lose their home, they lose their job, they are more and more likely to be in the cycle of the criminal justice system. So I ask y'all to join us, to have patience with us, and to realize that we are trying to move forward and to move people out of the criminal justice system whenever we can. And this bail bond reform, using risk assessments, making principled decisions on bail bonds will serve all of us in the community. The second thing that I want to talk to you about that I'm very passionate about, I'm also very afraid of, is something that has been done rarely across the country. It hasn't been done in South Carolina at all, to my knowledge. And it's something that I guess politically and personally it could be risky, but it's the right thing to do. And I hope, again, the ask from you is to be patient, to look beyond the headlines whenever there are headlines. To explain what I'm talking about, most of you, if you're here, know that there is an overrepresentation of minorities who are incarcerated in prison, that there's a disproportionate effect on minorities in their incarceration rates. And there's been lots done and said about law enforcement's role in arresting and having people charged and prosecuted with crimes, especially those who are minorities, and whether or not they're targeted that gets into racial profiling and all of those sorts of issues. And so you can Google that. You can pull up article after article after article about the overrepresentation of minorities in prisons and law enforcement's role in that. What you aren't going to see a lot about is the prosecutor's role in that. And that's something that's missing. And so what we are now doing in my office, and we started in January, we are now entering every plea offer that we make. And what that means is the data is going to be there to measure, are we treating people the same? Of course, I think that we are. I certainly hope that we are, and that's the culture I'm trying to build in my office. But the reality is implicit bias is everywhere. And I would be naive to think that it's not in my office. And the only way to find it out, you can't do it on anecdotes. You have to have the data. You have to look deep, and you have to look across those numbers. Now, data can't tell the whole story, but it can get us started in that dialogue in my office and in this community. Again, I would love to think that we don't have that sort of an issue, but when you look at the studies, you look at the research that's been done on implicit bias in the healthcare system, implicit bias in the education system, implicit bias in law enforcement. To think that we don't have implicit bias in South Carolina in the prosecutor's office, again, I think is naive. I'm doing all that I can to remove it. It's going to take training on my office's part, and it's going to take this data and this research and analysis to analyze the data to find out what's there. And should we find out that there is implicit bias in the prosecution sector of the criminal justice system here locally, we are going to take steps to change it. Whether it's attorney by attorney, or whether there's a certain segment, a certain sort of crime that we're somehow not seeing offers the same way for different folks. But I hope that you will be patient and be understanding that at least your solicitor's willing to look. Thank you.